Hi, everybody. Welcome back at EUSOMII. And today it's my great pleasure to talk to Dr. Renato Cuocolo. He is a board member of the European Society of Medical Imaging and Informatics, EUSOMII. He's vice chair of EUSOMII Young Club, and he's an MD, PhD from Salerno, Italy. And he has been with us already for a short version about his wonderful article, which he senior authored, Systematic Review of the RQS Radiomics Quality Score Applications on EUSOMII Radiomics Auditing Group Initiative. So thanks, Renato, once again for being here with us and giving us a bit more detail about your research on radiomics and in this paper in particular.
Thank you, Matthias, and for the opportunity to have a little bit of a longer talk on this topic. And yeah, in general, the radiomics audit group was created with the aim of providing systematic reviews of the literature and auditing of radiomics research, because the group members with different levels of experience, we have always perceived that there is an issue in quality in radiomics research across the field, and the idea was to try and make an effort to improve this and increase awareness and knowledge in the general readership and general radiology community overall, as it has been shown through surveys and other research. For example, one was recently published in European Radiology with Meryl Huisman as first author, that knowledge in AI and radiomics usually leads to more of an open mind and more fair assessment of these tools, and an easier approach also with the AI and radiomics-based products when they are proposed to us for clinical use in the clinical setting, and less fear of being replaced by AI and becoming, let's say, obsolete as radiologists, which is currently, I think, completely without base as a fear for our future. And in some ways, I think breast imagers, so the EUSOMII members, will be a little bit more familiar with these topics, as CAD software, it's not the first time that has been proposed for radiology, and breast imagers in particular should be familiar with efforts made in the past, not based on AI and the current tools, but on older generations of the same kind of concept, clinical decision support software. And that wave, I think, has a little bit come and gone, a little bit a victim of its own hype, and that's the risk that we want to avoid here with radiomics and AI. So, in general, I think also the term radiomics, while it has been a great success to market these ideas, it's also a very vague definition that creates a little bit of confusion in radiologists, because in the end, the definition of radiomics is just essentially any kind of quantitative image analysis that produces high amounts of data. And so potentially we are actually have already been working with radiomics even prior to the definition of radiomics and the creation of the term of radiomics. And it is true that this suits very well, however, the current research setting and introduction of deep learning in particular, because in my opinion, and this is a little bit controversial, deep learning falls also under the umbrella of radiomics, as even if we don't see it because it's hidden within the deep learning neural network, the neural networks are performing exactly the same kind of analysis that we perform for handcrafted radiomics. They extract high dimensional data from the images in a mathematical form through formulas, and then they condense it in a predictive model or classification model. And that's exactly what's going on in radiomics overall. However, we have seen, and I think all the viewers will have known by now, that there's been an exponential growth of radiomics research and AI research in the past decade. And in this, radiology has been a little bit of a late adopter compared to other fields, as we can see also in our current lives, and just have to look at what's available on our phones or in our cars. And however, this has not translated as quickly as one would expect to clinical practice. And so our work, our systematic review of other systematic reviews that have looked at the quality of radiomics research was aimed at highlighting and summarizing in a single paper what the most common issues are that have presented an obstacle to this transition from research to clinical practice. It's also true that there are two parallel efforts, let's say, because on one side there is a research community, more academic and more theoretical, and also maybe more extreme in some applications that would probably not be clinically feasible with the current regulatory framework, such as prognostication of patient outcomes and potentially impacting patient treatments right now, because the evidence would probably not be there and it would be very hard to actually implement in the setting. And there is an effort from industry to provide more concrete applications and probably even more mundane applications, such as improving image reconstruction, speeding up acquisition times for MRI, and improving image quality, reducing artifacts, and improving radiology workflow through exam prioritization. And it's also true that in part those industry efforts are not maybe as transparent as we would like, and do not always include a publication, an accompanying publication or accompanying research that's available to us to actually analyze and understand what's going on, because there's obviously a commercial interest there to keep some of the trade secrets secret and not open up everything to the potential competition as well. It's also true that there is probably some higher quality radiomics research and AI research that's going on, and there is also that are available to regulatory bodies such as the European Commission and notification and bodies that are involved in the certification process for. But that information does not always reach the public or the scientific community, and it can be a little bit of a different world. And it's probably something we should also push a little bit more on and expect companies to be transparent on that side. And in general, from our paper, you can see that pretty much the issues are very common across all fields of radiology, because there were 44 systematic reviews that included in our work and looked at in our work. And essentially, we can find that there are no big differences based on any of the sub-analysis. So it made no difference if the aim of the work was in neuroradiology, breast imaging, abdominal imaging. Pretty much the quality of the studies was very homogeneous across the board and overall unsatisfactory. As we can see, the mean and median scores to be fairly low, around 20%. So while it's true that the radiomics quality score is a strict tool, which sets a very high bar for research, also true that 20% with high standards cannot be an acceptable result as an average quality. So the hope is that through continued efforts and improving also guidelines and tools, the future provide some guidance also for the editors and reviewers and readers of the journals to provide some a greater base of knowledge, and that way aim to an evolution of the field and an improvement of the field, which could help us set realistic expectations on one side, one hand for radiomics research, and on the other hand, actually meet those expectations to allow the translation of radiomics from the research setting to clinical practice. Also for more ambitious aims compared to what is currently available now through the industry. And I think that's a feasible goal in a reasonable amount of time. And we have seen, again, just to make a practical example that's maybe more familiar to viewers, we have seen how overpromising can be an issue. For example, just how many years, just basic example, I think, how many years have we been promised self-driving cars or fabulous tools based on AI. And we also, what we see in those fields and what we can learn for radiology as well is that, you know, the first 90% of the problem is actually very easy to set up and solve. But there's always a last step that becomes the bigger challenge. And it's actually that last step. It can have very good driving assists, but getting to full self-driving seems currently, I think, impossible in a reasonable time frame, and it will require a very long time, notwithstanding any of the promises that car companies are making, especially some. And the same thing is true in radiology. So we have seen that because commercial products are available, that, you know, some tools to help us on specific tasks, image reconstruction, image quality, some kind of screening, for example, in mammograms. Those are fairly easy to implement and are currently available, and in most cases, they already work very well. But getting from there to a complete AI product or an AI product that could actually operate autonomously in clinical practice, I think the jump is much bigger than one might expect. And increasing knowledge and familiarity with these tools, I think, will allow us as radiologists to be more confident when using them and have more reasonable expectations both in research and clinical practice.
Yes, wonderful. This is a huge topic, and I'm really grateful that you're sharing this expertise. It's not just about, okay, this is black, this is white, here's my prognostication, here's my classification. There's a whole bunch of problems and challenges, but also promises and potentials behind it. And I think this is a wonderful take-home of you, Renato, or point. You have to balance, right? Never over-exaggerate your expectations, never to be over-critical, because this will kill the system. Looking at us as breast imagers, because, I mean, we are in general radiologists focusing on breast imaging, but we are doing this for the EUSOMII channels. Was there anything specific which you observed, or, as you already said, basically the take home of the papers was true, irrespective of the area where the radiomics was applied? Or were there any kind of, even maybe small nuances or something which you realized for breast? Or was it just everywhere basically the same?
No, pretty much there were no big differences based on area of application. It is true that for breasts, we know, you know, and I think the viewers will know even better than me, that there are several tools that do perform very well. Again, we have to keep in mind for specific tasks, narrow tasks, usually screening mammograms and providing a tool to assist, maybe even as a second reader, because that's also an open topic of debate based on the country where one practices. And so there are some tools, but not in terms of research quality. But again, there is a separation between what's going on in research, where usually also part of the issue is that researchers tend to aim higher their objectives. So that creates a bigger separation, what's actually feasible and what's interesting from a research point of view. And so, yeah, for breast imaging in particular, not from the research point of view, but I think a clinical point of view, it's one of the areas where radiomics and AI have more applications and probably a greater potential for application in the near future, if not even today already.
Yeah, this is a beautiful take home, and this is, I think, very important. So the key aspects are general, the key qualities is very similar, but breast imaging has a really bright future. And as I said, like the definition of radiomics, AI, deep learning, I mean, that's more like a scientific sort of scholarship sort of thinking. There are no black and white birds also in these terms. Now, Renato, if I may ask you a question, many of our followers will not be frontline researchers in radiomics, but they will be very interested to read and to understand the quality of papers. And as you have been nicely pointing out in your research, there are tons, not to say thousands, of papers. So as a interested, scientifically interested reader of a journal, what would be the key items you would advise to check for, to understand, like in, let's say, 2 minutes, this is a good study or not? The RQS is a system which is sophisticated, it has its limitations, but it's not feasible for a, let's call it, standard reader to apply in every. So what are the, like, the, you name it, 5 checklist items which you would go through, and which you deem most important to assess quality of a paper?
Well, that's a very nice question, because it is an
Sorry.
issue. Yeah,
That's a tough one, but you're the guy to answer.
Yeah, and there are, well, there are tons of tools out there, lots of checklists, especially prior to publication, to see quickly and easier than the RQS if a paper, first of all, is transparent in their methodology, in what they're reporting, because usually when some details are missing, they always open the door for doubt. But I have to say that the first things I look at, and I think are essential, is what kind of validation the model has. And even prior to that, and tied to validation, is how was the data handled. So the biggest issue I see is often the leakage of information between data sets, which leads to inflated results. Because ideally the validation set, or better said, the test set, because validation is one of those terms that have different definitions based on how it's used in machine learning, and it's also one of the sources of confusion, I think, in readers. The test set, which is used to assess the final model that is produced within a paper, which should ideally always be included, should be completely new and never used before in any step of the pipeline within the paper. So the first thing I look at is how was the data handled? Was validation included in terms of an external test set on which the model was actually then assessed at the end of the process? And then some more nuanced details. So how, if it's a radiomics paper, did the authors provide a detailed description of the methods used to extract the features or not? Even if you don't need to know what the single settings do, they should be presented clearly, otherwise there might be something going on there. If it's a deep learning paper, does it provide, it's not useful to know maybe all the single layers of the network, which should be included, but maybe more for technical readers. But I think as a general reader, does it provide details on how the training process was performed, how the optimization of the network was performed? And ideally, if one wants to go a little bit of a deeper step, where present some graphs of the loss curves, which are an easy representation of the training process, and can give a quick look and a quick overview of if any glaring issues were present during the training process, the handling of the training and validation data. And in this case, validation data refers to the data used to the model and not to actually test the model at the end, which is part of that confusion tied to the term validation, which is also an issue for radiology.
Wonderful, Renato, for making that clear. I think really, I couldn't agree more with you. Transparency is really an issue. This is not like a checklist item, but if people are kind of fiddling around the key matters, if they don't really talk about validation already in the abstract, this is not a checklist sort of thing. It's more like in between thing. You already get a feeling, okay, either they don't know, which it's not a great, actually, it's not great if they don't know about validation, or they just want to hide it. And this is again what you call transparency. Should actually be also be part, right, in the RQS, right? And thank you for pointing out the term data leakage, because many people don't understand it. It's also not part of the RQS as far as I know, but this is very, very important, not to mess around with the data sets. Wonderful. And validation, obviously, this is so important. And yeah, this obviously already explains that this approach is super data hungry, because you need a lot of numbers of cases. So Renato, we've been talking already about 20 minutes. It feels like 5 actually. I could talk to you for hours, but at that point, let's do a wrap up of our chat. I really enjoyed it. I want to thank you very much again, also on behalf of EUSOMII, for taking the time. Most precious, we're in the middle of the day. You took time for 1 hour for an interview with us, sharing your insights on the paper and on radiomics in general. As usual, in our podcast, in our videocasts, in our interviews, the last word belongs not to me. I'm just here the host, the guide. It belongs to you, Renato. So any final word you would address to us, followers of EUSOMII, breast imagers interested in radiomics, I would be more than grateful if you share that with us.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'll take the chance to advertise a little bit the ESR masterclass in AI, which has been recently published and made available, and new modules are coming out every month. So for anyone who's interested in the topic, that's certainly a very valuable resource. And also from reading the paper and maybe from this interview, one might get the impression that I have a negative outlook on radiomics, but I wanted to close on a positive note. And actually, for full disclosure, I am an active researcher myself in radiomics and AI, and I do think they have a very big potential to positively impact radiology and especially patient outcomes, which is the final goal that we should always keep in mind in the end. Especially for breast imaging, I think it's very important given the high volume nature of this field and the critical nature of the pathologies that you look out for in the end. And so the final message is that even if these issues are present and we should be aware of them, still, I think in the end, radiomics and AI do have a concrete potential to improve our clinical practice and ease our workload and improve patient outcomes in the end. So I think that's the final message, that we must be aware of the issues, but that should not prevent us from having an open mind and adopt good quality radiomics and AI products that are out there and are available to us and will be available to us in the future.
Thank you very much. I love that final take home. It's not a scholar exercise. It's not just a toy for boys who like to new stuff. It's all focused on what we as radiologists always should focus at the end. It's about patient care. Thank you very much, Renato, for sharing your time. Once again, best wishes to Salerno. Have a good day. And you guys at home, make sure to follow our channels not to miss any upcoming interview of M2Meets and all the other stuff which we're posting on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Have a good one. Bye.